to the Box Office Babbler. I'm Babbling Ben. In this channel, we put context into content through film and other media. It seems like there are hundreds of YouTube videos about The Wizard of Oz. That's because this film is a classic and it is timeless. An entertaining prequel is now in theaters, smashing box office records. Oz has entertained audiences for generations. It is one of the few films that is ageless. I have a personal connection to The Wizard of Oz. In the only play I had a part in when I took drama in high school, it was The Wizard of Oz. I was the great Oz himself, even with this voice. I don't have any pictures that survive today. I wish I did, but I am very familiar with the character and his motives. About the movie. In 1937, Walt Disney released Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first fully animated, full-length motion picture. This convinced studios that content aimed at younger audiences could be successful. MGM bought the rights to the book in 1938, with development beginning immediately. The script went through several rewrites before production began. There were many problems. Buddy Ebsen, the original Tin Man, had to be replaced because the Tin Man makeup caused breathing problems. Margaret Hamilton, the Wicked Witch of the West, was injured during one stunt mishap. So was her stunt double. The film stars Judy Garland as Dorothy Gale, Ray Bolger as the Scarecrow, Jack Haley, who replaced Ebsen as the Tin Man, Burt Lahr as the Lion, Frank Morgan as the Wizard. We already mentioned Margaret Hamilton as the Wicked Witch of the West. I'm sure you all are familiar with the plot of the film, so in this video I won't rehash it. If you haven't seen the 1939 classic The Wizard of Oz, you are probably very young. Today I'm going to discuss three mysteries of the film. First, what happened to Miss Gulch? Second, did water really melt that Wicked Witch? And third, what were Glinda's real motives? The film makes us wonder what happened to the Gale's neighbor, Miss Gulch. We last see her turning into the Wicked Witch of the West when Dorothy is in the tornado, before we see her bicycling away as Toto escapes. Here's my take on the possible outcomes. There is one thing that we can rule out because Toto is in the final scene. Miss Gulch could have come back for Toto when Dorothy was asleep. She wouldn't have made such a fuss about it. But Toto is in the final scene, so we know this didn't happen. Probably. It is possible that Miss Gulch changed her mind. Coming back to the Gale household and realizing Dorothy was hurt and in a coma may have caused Miss Gulch to change her mind out of sympathy. However, this seems out of character. It doesn't seem like Miss Gulch was given a lot of empathy by the writers, and I think we can rule this out. It is possible that Miss Gulch will return, but in the future, after the events of the film. But I believe Miss Gulch would have returned for Toto immediately after she found out the dog was missing. It is also possible that when Miss Gulch returned, Toto was hidden from her. But that seems out of character for Aunt Em and Uncle Henry. If this happened, it was Hunk, Zeke, and Hickory. But they wouldn't have been able to keep that secret from Aunt Em forever. I have considered that the Toto we see in the final scene was a replacement Toto. The Toto at the end doesn't seem as hyperactive as the Toto we saw in the rest of the movie, but this seems out of character for Aunt Em to trick Dorothy by getting her a new dog. Where would they get another brindle Cairn Terrier that looked just like Toto? That's not exactly a common breed. I think that this is the most likely outcome. Miss Gulch was caught up in the twister and died. I imagine at some point in the journey, she realized Toto was missing and immediately headed back to the Gale household. She may have been right behind Dorothy, who is returning from Professor Marvel, and she got tunnel vision. That is when she gets caught up by the tornado and is no more. This also makes sense because her Oz counterpart died. What do you think happened to Miss Gulch? Please comment below. I don't think it was water that melted the Wicked Witch of the West. When we are inside our mothers, we are swimming in amniotic fluid, which is mostly made of water. If water was lethal to the Wicked Witch, the pregnancy would have resulted in a miscarriage, probably before her mother even suspected she was pregnant. It would have seemed to her mother like an unusually heavy period. There are other things to consider. If the Wicked Witch was allergic to water, why was there a bucket of it within easy reach of Dorothy? There is also water in the air. The witch's castle was not in a barren desert. We see a river below it. Glinda's magic could affect the weather. She made it snow. If the Wicked Witch of the West could be melted by water, Glinda could have taken care of her years before Dorothy got to Oz. So what caused the Wicked Witch to melt? I think there's an easy explanation. It was the magic of the ruby slippers. The Wicked Witch of the West realized what was happening as Dorothy grabbed the bucket. Dorothy had a very powerful magic object on her feet. She had magical power, and she used this to defeat an enemy. So it wasn't the water, it was the slippers. Now let's solve the mystery of what did Glinda know. There are a lot of people on the internet who portray Glinda as a real villain in Oz. She sent Dorothy on a quest to kill her enemy, the Wicked Witch of the West. But I disagree. There is evidence in the science behind the film, in its development, and in the final movie. First, let's talk about the science. Dorothy was hit very hard on the head by a window that was pushed out of her house during the tornado. Everything from that point until the point she woke up back on her bed in Kansas was a dream. We don't know why we dream about certain people in our dreams. It has once been explained that everyone we see in a dream is someone we once met. Either we knew them well or had a brief encounter. At least this is according to a blog from Boston University. This will explain why almost everyone in Oz has a Kansas double. Glinda, however, is one person who does not have a Kansas counterpart, or so it seems. Some speculate that Glinda may have been Dorothy's late mother. She could have been a teacher, or she could have been a younger Aunt Em, and she even could have been a stranger. Dreaming is something that helps us clear our minds. It is important that we have dreams. Most dreams we don't remember, but some are very vivid. Some are exciting and adventurous, and some are as mundane as a trip to Costco. No one knows if the characters in our dreams have agency or can be held accountable for their choices. One thing that we can only dream about is whether or not the characters in our dreams have free will. Therefore, we don't know what Glinda's intentions were because she was a character in Dorothy's dream. What we know is that Dorothy was seriously hurt. Uncle Henry, at the end of the film, states we feared that we had lost her. Her body needed rest and healing. Therefore, if Glinda had given the spell for Dorothy to go home in Munchkin City, it would not have worked. If for no other reason, Dorothy's head and brain needed time to heal from its injury. When Dorothy's brain was sufficiently healed, she could wake up. That is when Glinda gave her the spell to go home. That is not the only plausible explanation. Here is another, and it has to do with how the movie was written. In the book, there were two good witches, like there were two wicked witches. It wasn't Glinda who sent Dorothy to Emerald City. It was the good witch of the north, Tattypoo. We did not meet Glinda, the good witch of the south, until the end of the story. The screenwriters combined the two characters into one. They may have done this to save on the casting budget, or to give Billy Burke, who played Glinda, more screen time. The screenwriters probably didn't consider that nearly a century later, this movie would make Glinda, who was supposed to be a good and trustworthy character, look conniving and manipulative. It would look to audiences nowadays as if Glinda sent Dorothy on a quest to do her own dirty work, making us wonder who really the good witch and who was the wicked witch. This was a premise that would make a killer Broadway play and a record-setting film. By the way, she seems to enjoy the Munchkin celebration of the death of the Wicked Witch of the East, which doesn't make her look any better. At this time, we must keep in mind who the intended audience was. It was children. Are children aware enough to put these things about Glinda together? Maybe not. This film was MGM's answer to Snow White. Let's see if we can shoehorn Glinda's real intentions in the plot. We'll start by talking about the wizard. The entire point of the film is that you don't get anything from the wizard. You find it inside yourself. He's worthless, even though people believe him to be powerful. He has political power, but no real power to grant wishes. It is believed by some that the Emerald City represents Washington, D.C., or perhaps paper currency. The wizard would represent the President of the United States. But let me also say that even silver and gold have value only because we believe them to have value. The protagonists of the film went to the wizard to get gifts they already possessed. The Scarecrow didn't have a brain, but he had smarts. He showed he had intelligence when we first met him. He explained to Dorothy how to get him off the pole. He was always the brains of the operation. The Tin Man didn't have a heart, but he showed empathy and a great capacity to love early on. It was he that put the fire out that the Wicked Witch of the West started to scare the team. He was always thinking about Dorothy and Scarecrow early on. The Lion was a coward, but he really confused that with wisdom. Dangerous and potentially life-ending adventures need a second thought or two. We should be careful. Dorothy had the power to get back to Kansas, but she didn't believe it. That's what the writers hoped we learned from the story. We don't see a lot of Glinda in the film. She was in 3 scenes. She was the first person Dorothy met in Oz. She made it snow when Dorothy and the Lion were about to be killed by poisonous poppies. And she was in the end to help Dorothy go home. Glinda was the one who got the plot to the story kicked off. She sent a 12-year-old girl on the yellow brick road alone. That seems a little bit reckless to me. How about you? Wasn't there a risk that the Wicked Witch of the West could have killed Dorothy and taken the ruby slippers? If she hadn't met the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodsman on the way, that is what would have happened. In Wicked, Glinda comes off as someone who is privileged, self-absorbed, and out of touch. I think that matches her character from the 1939 film very well. This is not someone who has the intelligence, self-awareness, and forward thinking to pull off such a plot. If Glinda had conceived of such a plot, she would have made sure that Dorothy got to the Emerald City in safety. Perhaps the Munchkin army could have escorted her all the way. Perhaps she could have bubbled Dorothy to the Great Oz with her. She would have had ensured Dorothy was trained and knew how to use the shoes. The only thing that Glinda knew was that the ruby slippers were powerful. But there is another person who is responsible for having Dorothy do his dirty work. The play and film Wicked make the wizard a villain in the Oz stories. There is ample evidence to support this. He became the wizard because he took advantage of the circumstances of his arrival. He is very intelligent, but he has no magical power. He made himself bigger than he was with the elaborate effects of light and puppetry. He fooled his people into thinking he was powerful. It was he that sent Dorothy and her friends to the castle of the Wicked Witch of the West to get her broomstick. This journey was going to end either the life of the Wicked Witch of the West or the 12-year-old girl who the wizard did not know. The plan to do away with the Wicked Witch of the West came from the wizard. The person who had Dorothy do his dirty work for him was the Great Oz, not Glinda. At least that's what we could be led to believe. The wizard, however, was disorganized. He didn't consider every possibility. He never figured out how to work the hot air balloon when the time came to make an escape. Playing the part in school, my understanding of the character is that he simply wanted to be left alone. He didn't want to be found out. He played the castle guard who sent everyone away. That was his protection. When he told Dorothy and her friends to bring him the broomstick of the Wicked Witch, he was giving them such a difficult task that he hoped they would give up, stay safe, go away, and leave him alone. He didn't understand that at least they would need his protection. It was simply the way the characters were written that could make Glinda or the wizard look bad. The Wicked Witch of the West was the only person who wanted to kill anybody for a pair of shoes. Dorothy relented and let her have the shoes, but she had to be dead for those shoes to leave her feet. The conflict in the story was between Dorothy and the witch. Glinda was the one who carelessly set it up, but she's not evil. The wizard isn't evil either. He just didn't want to be involved. If you empathize with the Wicked Witch of the West, that's okay too. Her sister was killed in an accident, and then someone outside of the family took the footwear. You'd be upset too. Again, let's remember this one thing about The Wizard of Oz. It was made for a younger audience. Things that are obvious to you as an adult, a child will not understand. They don't try to get backstories or the motivations of each character. They'll get that when they're older. The rest of us should try and enjoy the movie and try to remember what it was like to be young. By the way, Wicked is good. It's worth your time to see in the theaters. Catch The Wizard of Oz in the theater on its next re-release. I don't know when that'll be, but with the success of Wicked, it could be soon. I also recommend checking out Oz the Great and Powerful if you find yourself with some free time. It's not as good as the others, but it's not bad either. Our next episode will be about the film Trading Places. We'll discuss the commodities market and how Winthrop and Valentine became rich. Hope to see you then.